Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's third Mapping the Elephant webcast, Magnifying Value, a look at HathiTrust through a preservation lens. I'm here with Andrew Hart, Preservation Librarian at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and I am Melissa Stewart, Assistant to the Executive Director of HathiTrust. Welcome today. So I'll be moderating this presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Andrew in a minute. Just a reminder, any questions you can type into the event chat window, and I will read them to Andrew after his presentation, and he will answer those for you. Feel free to type the questions in at any time so that they're ready for me to read once we get to the question and answer session. And of course, you can feel free to type in any other questions that you have if you're having technical difficulties and whatnot. I am here to answer those as well. So I am going to turn off my video and turn it over to Andrew. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you. Okay, let's see if I can find the screen share. Okay, hopefully you can all see a screen that says Magnifying Value. And we'll take it from there. And I'm going to trust that Melissa's going to chime in if, in fact, that is not visible. And I should say you all look fabulous. Just a joke, because I can't see any of you. Okay, so this was originally something that I presented as a lightning talk at the HathiTrust member meeting in October. And with that in mind, I've adapted from it. But this is not an exhaustive discussion of preservation functionality. Rather, what I want to do is share some big picture reflections, things that I've thought about that have to do with the value of HathiTrust from that particular perspective of preservation. So, sustainability is a central concept in preservations. Whether we're working with tangible artifacts, reproductions, or foreign digital objects, our goal is the same, sustaining access for as long as the content has enduring value. So with sustainability in mind, I want to talk a little bit about the idea of a sustainability cycle, some ideas, actions, outcomes that constitute that cycle. It's a circle, so we could arbitrarily start anywhere, but I'm going to start with confidence. And I think confidence is sort of a baseline idea when we think about, again, HathiTrust from that preservation perspective, that HathiTrust only becomes valuable as a part of a preservation strategy if we've got confidence in sustainability. This is why we emphasize trustworthiness with the name HathiTrust and the expression trusted digital repository. And this idea also comes up when we think about frameworks for assessing digital repositories, that we don't just include technical characteristics, we include a lot of information about governance and financial health, that the sustainability of the endeavor of the institution is very much a part of what makes for sustainability for the items that we're trying to preserve. And the next idea here is that we contribute content, and that springs out of that confidence in sustainability. Again, could start anywhere. You could say that in a way HathiTrust really begins with the contribution of content to create that core of the resource. But I've decided to start with confidence because from a preservation perspective, we wouldn't be contributing the content under the rubric of preservation if we didn't have that confidence, that expectation for long-term access. So moving from here, we're going to talk about some things that have a less direct, but I think nonetheless essential relationship to preservation. We start with that confidence, we contribute content, and what that leads to is an enriched shared resource. We have something that has more than it had before each time we contribute. And from there, we can guess that we have greater user satisfaction, that the more there is for people to use, the more likely they're going to be happy. They're going to get more out of, literally get more out of the service. And then if our users are satisfied, hopefully that's also something that's going to attract and then reinforce stakeholder support. Our users are among our stakeholders, but there are many others who have a role in our funding, in our governance. And when we're at institutions with a mission that's directed at our users, that user satisfaction is where that stakeholder support is going to stem from. So it's the nature of digital preservation that our repositories have to continue long after today's technologies become quaint. And so stakeholder support has to be a constant through whatever ongoing evolution that we're going to have. In other words, HathiTrust will endure as long as enough people think it's valuable. I like to take an optimistic view on that and think of it as this cycle is representing our potential to keep growing stronger for preservation and every other aspect of HathiTrust's mission. I want to turn now to some of the implications for preservation practice, and beginning with ways that a library preservation program derives immediate value from HathiTrust. That cycle itself is kind of an abstract notion of things that go into making sure HathiTrust will endure. And so what I'm moving to now are ways that we sort of interact with that cycle. And my pages are out of order. Sorry about that. So when we have confidence and sustainability at the top, the holdings in HathiTrust become relevant for collections conservation decisions. For example, we can take a minimalist approach to conservation of some items with suitable surrogates in HathiTrust, and that frees up time for more extensive treatment of other materials. And I'm not suggesting here that everybody should be reviewing every candidate for conservation against holdings in HathiTrust, but rather this is just an example of the way in which understanding the holdings in HathiTrust as something that has longevity, that is something that will be around for a long time as part of our constellation of resources for our patrons, might make a difference in the way we think about individual objects and the kinds of resources we devote to their conservation. And I'm definitely not suggesting this as a replacement for, but rather a way that we can shift resources from one area to another, that we may do more of a type of work, we may do more work on individual items because of the time that we've saved by minimizing work on things where we can expect that users will by and large be taking advantage of the surrogate through HathiTrust. And when we contribute content, moving just down the chart a little bit here, we also achieve some valuable digital preservation outcomes. Again, this is for the library, not necessarily as a field. So first, HathiTrust provides a preservation layer for our book digitization program. In the case of UNC, we have a very happy working relationship with the Internet Archive, contracting with them to digitize books on the Scribe, and that automatically goes into their Access platform. But we don't really consider Internet Archive to be robust enough as a preservation solution to really think of that as our preservation layer. And so we look to HathiTrust, which has gone through an external review, which is a trusted digital repository, as that preservation layer. And then to take that a little further, it's not simply that we've provided that layer, that preservation layer, to our book digitization program, allowing us to really think of that as preservation reformatting, but that has a secondary effect of reserving space in our local repository for other digital preservation needs. We have many things that we need to preserve that are not well suited for HathiTrust. So putting what we can into HathiTrust allows us to use more of that other capacity for other purposes. These are pretty straightforward ways to draw on HathiTrust preservation functions. So in addition to the ways we derive immediate operational value, we interact with HathiTrust in other ways that strengthen our local preservation efforts by fueling this sustainability cycle. I already mentioned contributing content as a way for the library to derive operational value for preservation. The way we approach selection for digitization is also a way to feed the sustainability cycle. So at UNC, and here I'm really looking now at this part of the chart, We routinely search HathiTrust to see if digitization candidates are already available in HathiTrust, and we only add our copy if it will address missing content or add something unique. For instance, an author's inscription or annotations. And then to take this idea of targeting gaps a step further, we're now experimenting with using data from our catalog, data from the Hathi files, and then applying locally the HathiTrust rights algorithm to create selection lists of once again, papers in the wrong order, here we go, of materials in our collection that are not yet in HathiTrust and are most likely to be in the public domain. And once again, this is not prescriptive, but rather an example of how we can try to pursue our preservation program, pursue our digitization work, whether it's for preservation or not, in a way that doesn't just draw on HathiTrust as a resource, as a preservation platform, but actually contributes to it, that is enhancing it, is feeding the cycle. So if we move down a little bit in that same spirit, our active participation in copyright review for HathiTrust, and here in particular, I'm thinking of having somebody in the preservation department being one of the people who's contributing to that project at UNC. And then also a pilot project to pursue Creative Commons permissions have dual benefits. And the Creative Commons project that I'm thinking of here is that we've worked with HathiTrust and managed to put together a list of thousands of titles. I forgot to check the number before I logged on right now, but I think it's around 14,000 titles that are in HathiTrust that we think have some kind of a relationship to the University of North Carolina. Either were published by a UNC unit, or were things digitized by UNC, or maybe by other state agencies that have some relationship with this university and are right now in HathiTrust as things that are in copyright. And so our hope is that we can come up with a scalable process to pursue Creative Commons permissions and open more of that content up to the public. And the idea here is that when we enlarge the population of fully accessible titles, there are more surrogates we can rely on for at-risk books. So there's that direct preservation benefit. And there are, again, more titles available to our users, period, which gets back to the cycle. All of this is to say it's best to take a holistic view of HathiTrust from a preservation perspective. We derive the greatest possible value for preservation functions when we work as a community to create, sustain, and magnify the value of HathiTrust for users. The overall point here is that the persistence of HathiTrust as an institution is very much a part of our preservation interests and something we need to invest our thought and our energies and our actions into. That it's not enough just to think at the micro level of which items do we need to preserve, which items are most well suited to digitization that we want to put in this particular resource, but also to be thinking about HathiTrust as an entity and what it takes to make sure that that will be around through many, many iterations of evolution. And that, once again, was sort of a quick talk, but I want to make a few acknowledgements before opening up to questions. I talked about the data wrangling, our project with targeting gaps in HathiTrust holdings, comparing our collections. Jamie McGarty here at UNC is our data wrangler who's really responsible for that. And Anne Conway in my department is one of the people who does copyright review here, and I mention her in particular because she's in preservation, works intensively on this, and always reinforces my belief in the importance of this work and the value of having someone in preservation do it. Quickly, Aaliyah Howell did the graphics for these slides, and I want to thank Natalie, Angelina, and Aaron at HathiTrust because they've provided so much help and encouragement with our projects, providing data, helping us to think through, and really encouraging us to experiment in ways that we hope will eventually be useful for the membership. And now, see if anyone has questions that you'd like to raise or comments. This could be a discussion as well as a Q&A.
Again, please type any questions that you have into the event chat window, and we will answer those for you.
That was either so much confusing information that nobody can formulate a question, or
It
so very,
usually does
very
take a few
clear.
minutes. It usually does take a few minutes for people to get in. There you go. Could you talk more about Creative Commons permissions for copyrighted works?
Sure, sure. And so this is a pilot that's still at the taxiing to the runway stage of pilot. We haven't yet taken off. But our idea here is that, if we made an initial look at the list that we have and came to some of the kinds of problems that people always have in technical services, which is lots of variations in how authors are represented, how publishing entities are represented. But we were able to parse that some and identify clusters of things. So, one of them that I think will be, well, the one that's at the very top of the list for me that we should be trying to do something with, or we have, a few dozen titles that were published by the university libraries. And it seems to me that if we can't get our university libraries to grant Creative Commons permission for these titles to be open to the world, then probably we shouldn't be pursuing any others. But I'm confident that we'll be able to do that. HathiTrust, and I'm sorry I don't have pages ready to show you on screen, but I'm sure we could follow up later if you have trouble finding them. HathiTrust has some clear instructions now for how to provide Creative Commons permissions. There's a template to use. And our thought here is that we reach out to each of the publishers we identify, or I should say the rights holders, and find someone who has the authority to sign off, explain to them what we're doing, and then hopefully get that permission documented and sent into HathiTrust. There are some challenges to this. One of them is, for those, some of you may know this already, but the Creative Commons permission has to be accompanied by an itemized list of exactly which items in HathiTrust are going to come under that permission. And that means that if we have an agreement, let's say for a serial, if there's an entity that's produced something that is on an ongoing basis and they really just want to create a blanket permission, henceforth, you can just make the retrospective holdings open and then also everything we contribute afterward, that isn't going to work, that we really need regularly to submit a new permission that's covering things that have been deposited henceforth. And Melissa, let me know if that's changed since the last time I looked into this, but I think that's the way this works right now.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. But again, I don't want to overemphasize the challenges of it. I think there's a great deal of promise that, so our approach here is that we're trying to get a small team together of people who are likely to know stakeholders. I'm somebody who is involved because it's something I felt very strongly about that we should be pursuing, but we're trying to involve somebody from university archives who's going to know who the people are in different agencies on campus, different departments on campus, who are likely to have authority over, these records, really. And then people in, say, the North Carolina collection, which is a very large collection devoted to, you guessed it, North Carolina, who are likely to know people in agencies that are not necessarily on our campus, but are state agencies, and in general, trying to put together a team of people who have as much as anything knowledge of who the players are, who we might be able to reach out to. And I suspect that even if you're not at a state university or in a state library, there probably are titles that if you wanted to contribute to this, that you'd have some relationship to. Things where it may be in an area of great subject strength where a lot of the publishers that are involved, or the associations, the agencies that might be involved, anything that you think might have some kind of a corner where you would be able to enter into the conversation and educate people about their opportunity to make content available. One last thing I'll add here is that this is all content that I very much doubt anyone is looking at as a revenue source at this point, that it's not as though we're asking people to take their bread and butter and make that available for free. These are things that are by and large long forgotten, I think, by the original content producers and the current rights holders. And I suspect they'll be very happy to see a new life given really to the visibility that they'll get through HathiTrust.
I've got another one for you, Andrew. Can you talk more about using the HathiTrust copyright algorithm as part of the digitization decision-making process?
Sure. So there are a couple pieces of this that probably anybody out there could try as well as we could, and that's we're selecting segments of our collection. We define a search in our catalog. For the pilot, we're working with our health sciences library, and then we're matching that against Hathi files using OCLC numbers as a match point, and then we're going to, so that way we can winnow that down to only titles that are in our collection and not yet in HathiTrust. And then the next step with that is the part that hasn't really been done yet, is to point the algorithm at that list and then see what that yields for titles that have a high likelihood of being in the public domain, because it is an algorithm. It's not the same as having somebody do a very careful human review of what the right status is. But that said, this is the algorithm that HathiTrust applies as materials are ingested into HathiTrust. So we had some help from Aaron Elkis on this, where he prepared some documentation that is not so good for somebody with my skill level, but with somebody like Jamie's skills is very meaningful, and provided some Perl script that we're now trying to adapt. And if it works, we'll share out with our peers what we've learned. And I hope I'm not getting out ahead of things. We'll certainly share it with HathiTrust, and then if it's ready for prime time, HathiTrust will reach out to more of the membership to see if this can be expanded. But the idea is not rocket science. We're really trying to use something that's already been done as part of an ingest process on Hathi's end, and do something that's not all that unusual as a bibliographic data wrangling to just create this list. But within that simplicity, there's something that could be very important about it, that instead of really doing things in a kind of scattershot way, we could begin with lists of materials that we know are that we already know are things that are not yet in HathiTrust, and reduce the amount of searching we're doing to be able to more effectively, more quickly move things to camera, get things digitized, and not spin our wheels on searching things that are already available. I do want to mention one thing that haunts me a little with that, though, and I think there's work yet to be done in the field, is that if we were all to embrace that kind of approach with great zeal, we would not be dealing very well with filling in gaps because of things that were not well digitized. That in our very slow-going case-by-case kind of review that we do for candidates in preservation, we do check what's in HathiTrust. It's a quick check, but we do determine, for instance, if things are missing frontispieces or foldouts or maps, material in pockets at the back. And if they are, we'll scan our materials so that we can create something whole in HathiTrust. But this process that begins with bibliographic data won't recognize any kind of quality problems. If there are, image quality problems or missing content, that won't be something that we're going to know.
Any more questions?
I certainly welcome if more questions come in now, but while we're giving people a moment, I'll put up my email address. I'll be at this address for about another month, and then I'll be moving on from here to join colleagues at the University of Pennsylvania in a couple of months. But whether here or at Penn, I would welcome questions and ideas. People have suggestions about how to take these ideas further. If there are things that are related to what's going on at UNC, I would certainly make sure that those questions come back to my colleagues here at UNC, and then also hope to continue to work on these things with people, all of you out there in the field, to see what we can do in the future.
Great. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I'll give you 4 minutes back to your day. And thank you very much, Andrew. Please join us in 2 weeks for our next Mapping the Elephant webcast. And we will see you then. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.